Hi there, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Esoteric Psi, the podcast and institution where we strengthen and increase the consciousness of our community through sharing a dialogue of esoteric wisdom, psychology, and spirituality that you can use in a practical way to apply to your everyday life. My name is Maddie. I'm a spiritual life coach and philosopher, and we have two beautiful souls with us today. I'm going to hand it over to Alex so he can give a brief introduction of our topic and our other guest.
Hi, my name is Alex Ladana. I started my journey as a medical doctor. I'm a therapist now in different fields. And I love the fact that we're going to have another Ask Uncle Vlad session. We're here with Vlad Angert. He's energy healer. He generally heals people. He came with this concept of realized medicine, started out as a medium and worked his way up through different lessons he learned from embodied souls and disembodied souls. He's learned a lot about life and dedicates his life to helping people heal. Vlad, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, and we're glad to have you back.
Sorry I made you wait.
Yeah, it's fine. So we're going to be speaking today about the 7 Hermetic principles. These come from essentially Egyptian traditions. The Hermetic schools of ancient wisdoms. This is kind of like the 101 of the things you need to understand about the universe. So we're gonna go ahead and pass it over to Maddie so she could give us a bit of an introduction of what she understands them to be, and give an intro to the first one, and then that way we can begin.
Okay, guys, yes. So the first Hermetic principle is the principle of mentalism. So the all is mind and the universe is mental. That's a quote straight from the Kabbalion. So the truth that all is mind manifests itself when we realize that every single outward manifestation of our reality is literally created by the mind. So our material and seemingly solid surroundings have been shown by science, quantum physics specifically, to be made up of particles of energy and information. So even our bodies are comprised of this energy. And I think once we grasp this knowledge, we can realize the extent to which our mental processes create our experiences. And then we may be empowered to create the life we desire.
I think it's very important to differentiate between mind and consciousness, because when we say mind, most people understand either the brain in our physical manifestation or other things that have to do with that, right? But it's not like the consciousness and mind is not just limited to the physical. Like there's been studies, there was a case where a guy was missing 90% of his brain, and he was still able to function at a normal level. And that shouldn't be possible, right? So there are those studies, that specific case and a whole bunch of other ones have proven that consciousness doesn't realize just in the brain. And that's something that kind of the materialistic point of view of science compared to the idealistic view of other people that are more spiritual or aware of higher reality kind of differs. So that's important to understand. Vlad, what's your take and understanding of this? I know we're just popping this. Well, just FYI, Vlad never knows what we're talking about. We just surprise him with it every time.
I'm going to give you a disclaimer first. As you know, my people were slaves for 210 years in Egypt. So they thought they were magicians until they ran into us. And my take on philosophy or understanding of conscious reality, to me, it always has to be impenetrable. It has to include God, and it has to include a action-oriented technology through which you can reconnect to the creative force. And then, of course, as both of you have mentioned, be able to direct the creative flow into the human experience or whatever endeavor you're pursuing. One of the misconceptions of the mind being the brain is that all of these wellness people that are teaching the power of deliberate intent and, law of attraction, they seem to neglect the soul and the creative force. I don't know enough about Hermeticism, but I always gauge a system. I don't judge it, I just gauge it based on where it comes from. So if I look at a system, when you understand the power, deliberate intent, and understand the structure which provides energy for your soul and empowers you and engages you in co-creating, effectively co-creating a reality you truly desire, as you mentioned, I look at the country and its people. If it was so and it was working, then Egypt would be successful, and it's not. It's all hokey and great that the pyramids are there and they had ancient wisdom. As far as I'm concerned, they were lost in the sauce. And if they weren't, they'd have been able to keep us there. And they weren't. I don't have a conflict. They're wonderful, sweet, beautiful people. They understood consciousness in their own way. They probably most definitely interacted with alien beings. They understood how to move things in reality, but they didn't have an understanding of one source. They had an understanding of a moon god, a sun god, an air god, and so on, which insinuates that there are many sources of energy. There are, but not ones that can sustain your soul. Or the human experience is sustained only by one source. And so as a result of that, they were overwhelmed by their emotions. And that's how they met their demise.
Well, before we elaborate a little bit more further on this, I think a lot of what you said is true, but I also believe that we have to take the time framing into consideration and context of it. So I think the Egyptian people were very successful, but then, like you said, this started happening, this deviation. Or I have a friend, once we were talking about Hindu values and culture, and I was saying, no, the Hindu people are very evolved spiritual and whatever. And he said, most Hindus are Hindus, like Catholics are Catholics, right? They view it more of like a superstition and someone else having power instead of taking it to that themselves, right? So there is kind of a difference between like the mass populi, most people, and then people that get it spiritually and energetically, and that have more of this understanding, like you said. And there are different levels of evolution within. So like, because, and this is just kind of an assumption and deduction that I'm making, maybe because the Jewish people are a more tight-knit, smaller group and have more of a focus on how they're raising their children than most people, or most Jewish people, maybe they understand a little bit more of the higher value of it. But it varies, right, from consciousness to consciousness.
Alex, I don't think it has anything to do with raising your children a certain way. I think it has to do with the fact that most people don't realize that their understanding is directly intertwined with their circumstances and their outward reality. So Egyptians are beautiful. They're great people. They're sweethearts. I have a bunch on my Instagram. They joined me through something I did in Clubhouse. They're all super interested in this kind of information. Remember that the Egyptians we're talking about, the Hermeticism that you're talking about, those people were fully realized, but they didn't have a God. They had many gods. So as long as you continue to introduce that system that doesn't have an evolutionary way of realigning itself to your soul and refining yourself through collecting yourself out of the impulses of the human experience, and it's just a bunch of mind understanding, it's no different from the wellness that's being pitched to us by Deepak Chopra or this guy, I forget his name. He's not the new guy. He's a chiropractor, but he's preaching realized understanding.
Yeah.
There were many populations that were realized. So you can only be effective if you refine yourself.
I love what you're saying, and I do understand that, but it's just my understanding of this whole Egyptian culture and tradition was that there were people that for example, Jung and his archetypes, right? Just like the tarot deck or whatever, some people see them as just versions and expressions, like archetypes, like literally things that reside in the subconscious of each one of us. And some people they manifest them into forms of God, right? So what I believe was happening is like all these archetypes of the human subconscious were being, they were expressed as gods, and then people started revering them instead of understanding they're just parts of our subconscious that reside in us. So my understanding is that there were people in this high Egyptian cultures, these masters that understood that there was only one God, but there are different expressions of him. And the way of expressing these principles were through these gods. And this got lost in most people in most generations, and only certain people understood them to be the truth, that there is one God. And these images of the many gods are just expressions, different expressions of him through us. Like we do have kind of the warrior God in us. We have this female essence in us. We have all that because we have that potential latent in us. I don't know if it makes sense to you. And sometimes they get lost in translation, and people start worshiping them, just like the kind of...
I don't need to be right. It's a discussion. I don't need to be right. I can continue challenging you, but I don't need to be right.
No, and that's fine. Like I don't need to be right either. I'm just expressing like what my understanding is of reality. And if you have different information in your channeling, because just so people know, like you're a psychic.
In this human experience, in my human experience, I found very simply, because my light has been on since I'm a 4-year-old. I didn't always use it correctly, but it's been on. And so my process of refinement took 50 years, and I'm still not refined. So I've realized that the only structure that could keep me engaged and effectively co-creating that which is correct for me and is correct for humanity and is in consideration of others, it has to be morally correct and emotionally correct for me and can collect me from the impulses of the human experience. I don't see that for these other systems. So then for me, it's not a challenge because it has nothing to do with me. But if you want to discuss it, we can continue. But people say, look, Yogananda, who was a beautiful teacher, I read a couple of his books. He's talking about something that he was not realized. You can see it in his text, even though he writes, his books and his understanding. He was a yogi. He loved the master of Christianity. He was an incredible teacher, has a ton of followers, and he has a center in California. He was one of the first to bring Kriya Yoga here. And he was he was a Hindu that practiced Kriya, but he wasn't realized. And so if you want to be, it seems to me as if you're introducing the audience into realized systems that can be helpful or people can benefit from to be able to move forward in their lives and how to resolve their ups and downs and so on. That's why I say what I say.
Oh no, hey, no, we're definitely interested in what you have to say. That's why we have you on, and because your understanding of reality is very particular and I think it's very true. But as far as this principle of mentalism, everything is mind, or everything that our reality is expressed, our mind creates our reality. How have you understood this? Is this correct in your perspective or not? Or how do you understand as above, so below with this principle of mentalism? I think there will be more correspondence. But...
So I would rephrase it if it was me.
Yeah.
If it was me reading the science. I don't know if you've seen what's it called? The Silver Linings Playbook?
No.
So no, you have to see it. It's beautiful. So everything is God, Alex. Everything is not mind. Everything is God. and then mind comes after, because the mind is an expression of God. That which thinks and creates is everything is God. There's nothing but God. There isn't a needle in a hole or a hole in a needle that's not God. So if everything is God, then I'm including the creative force into my mind and the conscious mindfulness. I mean, it's going to sound a little hokey to the audience, but when I spoke to Moses, I said, how did you part the water? He says, as a collective mind, because I convinced the Hebrew slaves to understand that water is an emotion, and that they were enslaved by their emotions, and as a collective mind, they were able to part the obstacle, or the obstacle parted for them because they resolved their emotions. You understand? So I subscribe to the word. I just think that I believe and know, as a result of who I am and my practice, that everything is God, not everything is not mine.
So what's interesting is each one of these principles, or there are some authors that correspond them to chakras, right? So the principle of mentalism would have to do with the seventh chakra, sorry, with the crown chakra, and then with correspondence and so on and so forth. So there might be something else, because obviously there's something else above that crown chakra that brings light into us, right? So what you're speaking about could be like what comes before. Everything is God, and then mind manifests, and then the rest come.
Absolutely. Because there's levels of the mind in the unseen world, which is God.
Yeah.
So those levels is what feeds our levels, as you relate to the chakras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the unseen world, which I call God, and which is the flow or the creative force, it has its levels that feed this reality and its levels. So the reality you and I relate to, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? But it all feeds knowledge, understanding, mind, and so on. Well, the only way I can be effective in using these attributes is if I have a relationship with that unseen world that is active, and it constantly feeds. So when you say, as above, so below, well,
which is the second principle. Sorry, I jumped ahead, but yeah.
So as above, so below, then I can insinuate that astrology controls me because the stars are above me, but it does not. Mercury in retrograde does not have to affect me. It exists, and astrology is an incredible science. It's so precise. It's also impenetrable because it's God created. And so then the fact that I'm a Pisces with 7 planets in Aries does not define me. I overcame that because I connected myself to the creative force, and it soothed my desire to be at war with myself or create a war outside of me, because that's what the 7 planets in Aries means. If I don't have a war, I'll create one. Mm-hmm. You understand? So once I connected to the creative force and live an observant life that sustains me, it soothes my desire for war. And now I turn my swords into surgical tools to help people. So that means that which is above me truly is God. There is astrology exists, but there's a world beyond the stars.
And just like that consciousness, right? Like we can, once we're conscious that there is a predisposition, but we are creative forces, and we can modify that in our own consciousness. So that's why actually mentalism, everything is mind, comes before as above, so below. But Ms. Maddie, can you please give us your understanding of the second principle and introduction to the second one? Now that I jumped ahead, I'm sorry about that.
Absolutely. No problem. So the second law is the principle of correspondence. So this principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. So all the laws and patterns that govern the macrocosm govern the microcosm, and so on and so forth. And you already mentioned this axiom, but as above, so below, and as below, so above. That's stated by the Kybalion itself. So what's your take on this?
As above, who are you asking, Alex? Or?
Yeah, yeah, I think Vlad, but yeah, I only said half of it. So as above, so below, and as below, so above. So that corresponds to what you were saying, that consciousness can also affect. So there's a two-way highway via. Yeah. So what are your opinions on this? Because I only mentioned half of the quote. Anything else you want to mention, or do you want to jump into the third principle?
Vlad, what is your understanding, or do you have any thoughts or insights on this?
You'd have to repeat your question now, because I lost you in translation for a second. I'm not very smart, so don't mind me. I don't have a college degree.
What would your understanding be of the principle of correspondence? So that there's always a correspondence between the laws of being and life, the macrocosm and the microcosm.
It's a little scientific for me, but
Well, I think it can be narrowed down, like we mentioned, as above, so low, but as below, so above as well. That two-way highway.
I think it also really, like, the law of creation also plays a role in this, because as we manifest our personal realities, we're also creating our collective reality as well through this process.
absolutely. So then we're all responsible. Let's just now that I understand you, I can react to it. We're all responsible for the ozone layer. Why? Not because we're collecting plastic bottles or we're changing our emission standards, because we're filling the internal hole that is in our souls or in our emptiness. And so then the creative engagement fills the emptiness in the outer layers. You understand? It's not, you can collect bottles till you're blue. Manufacturing is manufacturing. You can clean the ocean, which I love that. I mean, it's what I want to do when I'm a gazillionaire. I want to clean the oceans. But the gaping hole in the ozone layer is the hole in us, because we're not full with the creative force, which then would cause the hole in the atmosphere to fill up. So if that answers, or if I'm correctly understanding.
You are correctly understanding that, and I think that's a beautiful analogy. And it has to do with the mentalism as well. So it's mentalism and correspondence, and they're tied together. And I think you did an awesome job of explaining that, especially specifically as a collective. Do you have any thoughts or examples in our individual life you would like to share, or do you want to move on to the third
In terms
one?
of what? Filling the emptiness?
Well, just with correspondence, like how
It's a void. It's a
Huh?
void. It's a external void. You know, if you look at the presidency, if you look at who's running the world, if you look at world hunger and the fact that people don't have water, 6-year-olds are walking in India a mile with buckets to get water. 1.6 billion people. I mean, it's unfathomable to me. I had a dream recently where I was, I don't know where I was standing, and I was standing in this position, and my arm was in the unseen world, and I was standing up straight, and I was talking to God, and he said that the unlimited supply is right here. So once we become aware of the unlimited supply, we won't have any more drought in the world. There'll be plenty of water for everyone. People are so busy digging below, they've tapped the earth out. They've drained the resources of the earth. There are no raw materials. Because the truth is, it's the unlimited supply is in our growth and our absolute necessity, or actually our requirement to tap into the unseen world. That's where the unlimited supply is, not in the earth.
Yeah, I think that's very beautiful. And As a collective, that's true, but also like in our own personal life, right? So for example, if someone can't find a spouse or a partner, maybe it's because of their void inside, or whatever partner they do find will probably reflect what they're missing in themselves, right?
Do you know who Munji is?
No.
He's a guy online. He's a Rasta.
Okay.
He's hilarious, and his advice is incredible. I love the guy. He's a spiritual guy. He's a spiritualist. I think he's Jamaican. I'm not sure. Maybe from the Bahamas. And he calls it kissing frogs.
Okay.
Waiting for them to be princes, right? So instead of kissing frogs, you have to stop being a torso. When you fuel and have a devotional life, so whatever denomination or religion you belong to, and you fuel yourself with something that you have an allegiance to and not a potpourri of different nonsense, you fill up your soul with its familiar vibration and its sense of truth. And then you encounter an expression that is an expression of what you believe to be true. Certainly it has its challenges in it, because that's how we refine ourselves. There's another guy, Sadhguru.
Yeah, Sadhguru.
He said, I recently saw a video of his, he says, oh, soulmate is an American concept. It's nonsense. No, it's not nonsense. I don't know how this guy has an audience. I mean, it's not nonsense. We're souls going through a human experience. And the only way, you can't refine yourself if you're by yourself and removed from life. You cannot refine, nobody's gonna call you on your shit, Alex. You can be by yourself all you want, call and be a self-proclaimed guru, but who's your sounding board? Who's seeing the truth in you? Who's letting you know, listen, my young man, this is bullshit that you're running. It's not correct for this relationship. It's incorrect. What you're doing is incorrect. So the morality comes from your counterpart and vice versa, because we're expressions of each other. There absolutely is such a thing as a soulmate. We don't meet the one, they become the one, because we encounter someone who we have chemistry with or we're attracted to, but we refine that aspect of ourselves, and then we choose a common denominator that keeps us together. But to say that soulmate is an American concept, it's not an American concept.
Well, there's this movie called No Solar. I think it's translated in English. It means our home, but in English, it's translated as like Astral City, a spiritual journey, which is a horrible translation, in my opinion. But anyway, it's this disembodied soul that's dictating to this medium, like the experience in between lifetimes, right? So he says that, in between lifetimes, we go back to remembering everything we forgot. And when we're ready to incarnate again, we make kind of contracts with other souls that are going to be in this embodied experience as well. And okay, so you're going to teach me this, and we try and figure out our incarnation as well as possible, so that we can refine ourselves in what we couldn't refine in other lifetimes. So I think there is such a concept as a soulmate, in the fact that there's a soul that we make a connection with, and we kind of advance, we refine and polish each other, and we go through, but it's a contract or an agreement that we made, and we're just fulfilling it in this lifetime. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
You can make, there are many people that insinuate there are contracts and agreements. We're definitely kindred souls that will move into the human experience together. But remember, then you have what's called choice in the human experience. And if you don't recognize that, you can continue meeting kindred souls or soulmates. You're my soulmate, so should we get married and run off and have babies together? I mean, what does that mean? We're soulmates, we hang out constantly, we have a common denominator, we have a common interest. I'm sure there are things that are in common. It doesn't mean anything. What means something is that when you're in the human experience, you're willing to refine yourself, and you're willing to recognize that this is a counterpart that's going to make me help to bring out the best of me. And I'm willing to get honest with myself and say, you know what, she's got a point.
Beautiful. Maddie, do you want to go ahead and introduce us to the third law?
Sure thing. Also, I absolutely loved that, resonating with everything as usual. So the third principle is the principle of vibration. And this quote is taken straight out from the Kabbalion. It says, nothing rests, everything moves, and everything vibrates. So essentially, movement is everywhere. It is the law of our reality that everything is constantly in motion. Nothing stays still. And this principle explains that the different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration, which there are millions of varying degrees of vibration. And I think as humans, it's our mission to refine our souls in this experience that we're having here on Earth. And having an awareness of our own vibrational state is key for self-understanding, self-realization, and being aware of our vibration, we can attempt to stabilize or attune it to a desired frequency for optimal experiences in our lives, as was mentioned before. So that is my understanding of this principle. And also there is a quote from Tesla that kind of centers around this as well. And he says that
He doesn't believe in God.
He doesn't?
Wasn't he Jewish though?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Holistic.
I think this is a pretty good quote. Of course, factoring in that, all is God, which I actually very much believe in that. But this quote says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I am adding, and God.
I love that.
And God is energy too,
Yeah, well,
the only energy.
Yeah.
Aside from that,
matter doesn't exist.
All I gotta say to what you said just now, Maddie, is amen. There's no question. But for the sake of the human experience, the way to recognize your vibration is through your willingness to admit and acknowledge information that resonates with your sense of truth. Not information that aggrandizes you and makes you a self-proclaimed guru or life coach or whatever people call themselves today. But when you're learning concepts, if you're not using them on yourself, they're vibrationally incorrect for you.
Yes, you have to implement everything.
Absolutely. If you don't do it, people want to learn with me, and I have a disclaimer. You can't learn this, you got to earn it. You can't read a book about realized understanding. You have to do it. When you do it, then it becomes yours. And then you vibrationally refine yourself. You clean the window of the soul, which is your sustaining vibrational force, which receives from the ultimate generator that provides us with a vibration. And if you're vibrationally muddled and you're grasping from different disciplines, well, those vibrations can't sustain you because you're cross-wiring. It's mixing. It can't sustain you. You want to be Hindu? Be Hindu. You want to be Christian? Be Christian. That's why all these, why do I have to be what I was born? You don't. Find one that keeps you honest. Honest means I'll give you an example.
Well, you definitely keep me honest.
maybe y'all will relate to it. I want to be a priest, or I want to be a guru, but I want to secretly, chase the ladies. Is that a reality? No, because why not? Why not?
It's not consistent.
No, but I'm a realized person. I know how to maneuver. I can affect women's reality. I speak the truth. I can see outcomes. I heal people. I got all kinds of talents. Why not? It's not consistent with what? Why not?
Belief of the practice.
Yeah, with the system that you're in.
What do you mean?
So if you chose to be like Catholic priest, like the laws, the
Catholic priests, they're not in the world, so they can't tell you anything because they're not. They've never had children, and that's a law that was passed in the 1700s because the Catholic Church. This is a real thing. My former father-in-law, who's a Roman Catholic, who's an attorney and a councilman, told me this himself. He said, you know, that the church passed a law in the 1700s because men were going through menopause in their 50s, and they wanted to become more spiritual when they were no longer able, physically able to satisfy their wives.
Andropause for men. Menopause is for women. Andropause is for men.
Thank you. And so they go become more spiritual and go, learn with the church, and all of a sudden, a guy would die and all his wealth would go to his wife. So the church passed a law saying that you can't marry if you want to be a priest, so that if they die and their family has wealth, it all goes to the church. That's a real law. But aside from that, the reason it's not a reality, because if I accept that we're all souls going through human experience, then if I live below my waist and my mind and my intentions are stimulated by that, then I'm not truly who I say that I am. I only know this because I've been there. It's not, it doesn't go with the vibration, because it depletes you physically. The chase depletes you. And even if you don't have to, and they come to you, it depletes you anyway, because you're having to manage relationships. You're having to manage physical, emotional people who are needy and who want your attention. It doesn't work. It takes you apart, and they always have you in their minds and in their speak. They're speaking and thinking and feeling about you. So you're not together. And so vibrationally, it doesn't work.
I think that's beautiful. Do you want to go into the fourth law? Because I think we're not going to have time to finish all 7. But let's go into the fourth law. Maddie, that's okay with you?
Yep, that sounds.
I have till 1, so.
Oh, okay. I have till 12:30.
Okay, so the fourth one is the principle of polarity. So everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. So what I understand from this one is that this law explains a lot about the shifts and the swings of our reality. And there's this polarity here that's spoken about. And I think it implies duality and opposites, which are really just extremes of the same thing. So to my understanding, it's like this law almost presupposes or implies the meaning of oneness. Since, for example, happy and sad is just describing the extremes of how we're feeling. Intuitive and logical is explaining different ways of one concept, which is states of thinking. So what do you think about this and the concept of oneness? It's a little paradoxical, but.
Well, first, like the principle of polarity involves, positive and negative yin and yang, and then also gets in the 7th law of gender, gets explained a little bit more. But yeah, what do you think about polarity, yin and yang, opposites, one pole and the other pole, Mr. Vlad?
It can cause a problem. It's a wonderful possibility that exists in all relationships and exists in ourselves. My treatments and my healings are only extreme because of what I did prior to becoming this and recognizing my abilities. I was extreme in whatever it is that I did prior to this, so that I took that extreme to the other end of the spectrum, and I turned it into this. So now, because I'm extreme, well, now my treatments are that way, and my possibilities and abilities are that way. But in a relationship, it could cause a tug and pull unless there's a common denominator.
I find that very interesting.
Opposites do attract, right? Opposites completely attract, right?
And complement each other.
It just, of course, it's a thing. So, but the issue with that is, I think we had spoken about this in the past. I learned from my relationships, contrary to what Sadhguru says. My ex-wife was the opposite. She didn't have faith. She didn't have trust. She was very practical. She was raised by lawyers and judges and councilmen and congressmen. And she to this day lives in worst case scenario. And we were living on a $50 million environmentally conscious resort, driving in the Ferrari to our wedding while she was trying to sabotage the outcome. So then I spend my time trying to convince her to have faith. So what I'm doing is really pulling myself back. So I would take 7 steps forward and 5 steps back. So the extreme, what happens in the tug of war is I'm not moving forward and we're not moving forward. So I'm constantly forced in a relationship to try to convince the person to have faith and understanding, so that that common denominator that we didn't have, even though we're such extremes. Yeah, she was calmer, she was more mature, more organized, more concrete. I was just a dingbat with a bunch of special abilities at 32, 34 years old. But the truth is, if we weren't so extreme and so opposite, and we had a common denominator and common trust and faith, we would have achieved things, and we've been incredible manifestors. I mean, she's incredible. We're an incredible manifestor, but she can she creates it and then kills it. In everything, in relationship and in work, and everything. So then it can't succeed.
You know, I find this principle very interesting, because as we're going down kind of the chakras, and the principle of vibration corresponding with the throat chakra, and this principle of polarity has to do with the heart. I find it very interesting that it has to do with this concept of love, because I think when you experience love truly and profoundly, you can see the polarities within a person, like what they are and what they can be, and all the different aspects of them, but you accept them regardless of that. But when you don't live in that unconditional love, you see that in them, but it bothers you, it affects you. So I think
if it bothers you and affects you, Alex, you can't move forward.
Exactly, because you're not living in unconditional love.
If your wife is more precise than you, and she's responsible, and she's about her business, and you like to talk about your business, you can't move forward, because she can't get you to jump on board and get up on time. So it frustrates her. She's going to lose respect and run away from you.
Okay. And as this principle of vibration, of polarity, positive and negative, masculine, feminine, whatever that says, it exists even if you don't choose that. Like, for example, if you have that pull of spirituality and concept and God, and someone who doesn't believe that, it still exists outside of you. That might be a bad example. But for example, if we to receive and to give, right, that expresses itself in the both in the masculine with the phallus, and the feminine that receives, right? And even in the same gender, there is that same principle, left hand, right hand, hemispheres. So it exists inside us, and when we find some opposites attract, but they also complement each other. So I think it's a different, it's a principle that's very extreme, because it exists both inside you and outside of you, this polarity, this yin and yang. Any last comments on that before we move on to the next principle? Vlad?
Yeah, I definitely, to some extent, have to agree with the push and pull. I mean, even the way we exercise, there has to be that polarity. There has to be, I don't expect my wife to be just as ambitious as I am, because she sets the standard of peace in the house. I'm the driving force. I'm going out there and making things happen. I'm constantly have ideas. I'm churning constantly. I don't need her to be the overachiever, and I don't need her to be the housefrau, but I also don't need her to come up with the ideas, because she provides peace to my insanity. You understand? So these opposites make sense, because I would be in 6 different directions had I not surrendered into her love and peace, so that I can fuel my outcomes.
Well, I think that's very important with the principle, because in Moses Maimonides, I think Resnick talks a lot about that, who was like an advisor to Sultan Saladin. He says that when you have a quality of yourself that's very extreme, for example, people that give too much, and then they end up upset because people don't correspond with that or don't give back. Like if you give too much, then you got to jump to the other extreme and be selfish for a while, so you can find kind of that middle point. So when you are refining and perfecting yourself and your soul, if you live too much in one extreme, you have to jump to the other extreme so you can kind of find that happy medium.
I'm a happy medium.
That's a different type of happy medium. But okay.
I think that's great, Alex, but I can't jump to the other extreme if it's an unfamiliar zone for me. That's another confirmation that you need a soulmate. It's not familiar for me to stop. I only know the hustle. So when I was in my practice, probably around 2007, I met this girl from Maryland, Silver Spring, Maryland. She was from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Super bright. She's brilliant. She said to me, "Why don't you take the hustle out of your practice?" I thought, first I took it as an insult, and then I thought, she had a point, but I don't know how. So what it required is someone who has the peace and who doesn't need the hustle and the drive, that I can surrender, and then I don't have to go out there and get it. It'll just come to me, because it provides the other polarity, or the other extreme provides me with that peace. Now you could say on my own, I can engage myself in observant life and bring that peace as a result of my practice. It's not enough. There's no sense of this. There is a sense of urgency, but there's nothing anchoring me. The practice will not sustain me in being calm enough not to continue to go out there and get what I need. What finally got me to calm down is another human being who has enough love where I can say, you know what, I'm good. I don't need to go out there. I'm good right here, and it all comes.
But don't you think that's part of it? Well, stepping outside your comfort zone, like when you do find another human being, well, I think regardless of your life will manifest that other extreme, that other pole, that other human being that will teach you, or that going to their pole is a thing. Even if it's not a life partner, which most of the time it will be, but it might be just a friend or someone that lives in the other extreme. But you making that conscious decision to, instead of fighting that and hating that, to jump outside of your comfort zone and live that other extreme, I think that's an important conscious decision, don't you think? Or
yeah,
I would highly agree with that. And I've experienced this firsthand through our practice, Alex. So, Alex is my therapist. And I used to have the issue of not being able to set boundaries. And I had this people-pleasing tendency. And so that was my extreme, was like the people-pleasing tendency. And on the other extreme, it's like setting boundaries and being assertive. So Alex told me that I need to start living on the other extreme and being extremely assertive and setting clear boundaries with everyone. And so that's something that I had to go through, and now I can see the balance of both.
but it was uncomfortable as hell, wasn't it?
Extremely.
In the beginning.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
So setting boundaries and being assertive is great. But if you have people around you that cross boundaries, it's because you need to correct your own boundaries and not set them for others, but set them for yourself.
Very true.
You understand? It has nothing to do, if you understand what it means to be realized. I had a yoga teacher who's pretty well known. She said to me, "Oh, I opened a yoga studio in Manhattan. Mind you, there's one on every other corner. And 20 people showed up, or 21 people showed up, 20 women and one man. And the class was incredible. And the fact that so many people showed up was incredible. But this guy was totally inappropriate. He kept looking at the women inappropriately and being, sleazy and just completely inappropriate. And then at the end of the class, he walked over to me and threw $20 at me and left, and then came back again a second time during the week and did the same thing. I said, "So what'd you do?" She said, "I decided it was time for me to speak up. It was an opportunity for me to stand up for myself." That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not realized thinking. The point is to look at your environment and to say that you created a sacred environment where you're teaching people oneness and alignment, but there's an element of you that's inappropriate, that has no boundaries. And he throws $20 at you because you are of no value to yourself. So your stage is speaking to you and showing you yourself. So you don't need to go correct him. You need to correct your own personal boundaries and how you treat yourself. You don't need to become adamant and push everybody away, because you become by yourself, because the rest of the world is the cause of your ups and downs and your issues. That's not the fact. That's not the truth. That's a psychologized framework.
Yeah, but isn't there sometimes a correspondence between you fixing that internally and externally? I do believe, like, you're right, and we must fix internally first. And if that shows up, maybe it means that you didn't fix it internally, right?
Alex,
But
I can't come to you if you have, let's say you're a student and you constantly assume that we have a relationship and you assume on me and you constantly demand information, and I'm shy and I'm constantly overextending myself. But the truth is, you're a student. You should be paying for your sessions, right? So why am I not asking? I ask you, Alex, you know what? I don't really like your attitude. You're not paying for your sessions, and this isn't a charity. No, I need to learn and honor and value myself. Therefore, then Alex will see my value and say, you know what? This is my teacher. I got to reciprocate somehow. I can't ask for free time. It doesn't work that way. You understand? That's how it works. Because if you want to refine yourself in a realized way and manifest what you desire, that's the only way it works. You can't go out there and fix everything. It's not going to happen. In fact, once you accept and embrace the fact that they're all physical manifestation of the inside of you, well, the inside of you has no boundaries. Not to set boundaries, but you have no boundaries for yourself. The woman in the yoga studio had no boundaries with being inappropriate, sexual, or being inappropriate, of not knowing her value. So she has to correct that in herself. So then the new stage that she forms as a result of her light manifests as an appropriate environment for a higher purpose. And there's no more element of her that is inappropriate.
Right, because if you truly did respect yourself and have these boundaries set, then you wouldn't actually attract or create those experiences.
You're not attracting, you're manifesting. That's the difference between attracting and co-creating. It's not a question of attraction, it's a question of manifestation of creating. So it's an expression, not a mirror. It's not a reflection, it's an expression. Once you get that, then these forms, these ideas, they form themselves as an expression of elements of yourself. So if men aren't valuing you, it's because you don't value yourself. You're needy, you're overextending yourself, you want to save everybody because you think you're their savior. You don't need to be saved. Nobody needs to be saved. No one needs to be saved. If they're not on your level, they don't belong. You need to encounter someone who's on your level when you are truly living that level. But if you're not living that level, you're going to encounter another human being who's also not living that level. They talk a good game, but they're not about their business.
So it's your, I love how you elaborate on that, because I don't think it was clear in the beginning, but I think it's crystal clear right now. I had something to say, but I was just blown away by what you said. I think it's a perfect time to kind of end the session, because we checked out 4 and we're going to take it off next session from 5, which is my favorite principle, the principle of rhythm. I love the rhythm and the flow of the universe, and that's I could talk a whole bunch about that. I'm sure you're going to be able to talk about that as well. Vlad, thank you so much for stopping us around.
Come on.
It's a
my
pleasure.
pleasure.
No, it's our pleasure to receive those clarifications and slaps, and for you to call us on our own BS. And I know that some people listening might resonate with that, and sometimes you might not, because it's difficult to look inside and to see where you're fucking up. So
it's very common amongst especially women. If you're coming to class and you're dressed and you're coming in a bathing suit, what do you think what's the message you're sending to the men? Oh, it's my body, I can wear what I want. What the fuck are you talking about? What are you saying to me? If you're posting on Instagram ass pictures and bathing suit pictures. What does that say about you? That you like to read books? What does that say? It means you're looking for that kind of attention. You value your body, and so you want to show how beautiful you are externally. That's great. But understand that the other opposite polarity, as you call them, they live in their groin. So they're going to see your Instagram pictures and say, wow, she looks intelligent by the size of her ass. I mean, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, I think that's intense. You know, I think that's one extreme, and the other extreme would be like the Muslim culture, that where they cover the. I mean,
no, that is not the case. That is not the case. Okay. The Muslim culture minimizes women because, according to their understanding, God punished women for co-creating life, for participating in the process of creation, and gave them their period and gave them pains during childbirth. So they minimize them because they're insignificant. But since we're in the human experience, they nullify them. And the women nullify themselves because their acceptance of the fact that that which created them is above them, and they're relegated to the human experience. And they're not all living like that today. There are beautiful couples that you can see that are respectful of each other and honor each other, but they still, their internal belief system is that they're not, it's not the same, Alex.
Okay. Oh, and now that you explain that, I do understand that a bit differently now, but it's a different belief system. You have to see.
I'm not trying to say that, look, if a girl's walking down the street and she gets jumped and raped, she deserves that. Is that the extremist Muslims say, well, she shouldn't have been walking through the neighborhood uncovered. Well, I mean, there's such a commentary, but the truth is, if I live like a victim, and I'm afraid of everything, and I go to East Harlem in Manhattan, I'm gonna get robbed. But I could walk through East Harlem 4 o'clock in the morning because I don't feel like a victim. Not because I'm tough. I don't feel like a victim. Nobody's gonna look at me.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's a very important principle there to understand of creating your own reality, but also that we should live in a world where men don't live in their crotch, and where that shouldn't be a risk of getting mugged, but we don't. And I think it's important to be realistic with the world we live in and the world we want. And we have to take steps to live into the world we want, but also the realized thinking is obviously fix yourself first, fix the victim mentality first, and then the world will correspondingly change. Thank you for that last clarification. I know it took us for a second. This has been Esoteric Side Institution, and we'll put Vlad's information, as we do, on all the links before, so that you can access him via his Instagram. We don't have his website information yet, but if you guys are interested in that.
I think it's in the process of being created.
Okay, so your Instagram will suffice for now. Cool. This has been Esoteric Side Institution, where we started dialogue about esoteric wisdom, psychology, and spirituality, so in a practical way, so you guys can apply it to your everyday life. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Vlad.